morning. Welcome to Law Power Hour. We've got the thaw out here today, so if you're out moving about, you might want to meet David Sobel. David?
Yeah, hi Barry. Thank you for having me today.
Well, I said I want people to meet you because of what you do. You own a company called
Proven Resource, right.
And where are you located?
I'm in Farmington Hills, Michigan.
And what's your telephone number out there?
My telephone number is 888-789-1715, 1715.
And people want to know what Proven Resources is because I think it's really a very important company, provides an extremely important service for people. Right. Let's talk about it.
Okay. Well, Proven Resource is actually not a law firm. I am a lawyer, a real estate and finance attorney. And Proven Resource is a source of information related to real estate issues, financial issues, financial disputes, mortgage lending issues, and we disseminate information for free to the public, and that information is available usually online, or we have a lot of print media that we provide our people who are interested in the information. They could be our clients, or they're just people inquiring as to how to take care of their legal and financial issues.
Let me break it down in simple terms for our listeners. You see all kinds of people advertising on TV. I win, First Family of Michigan, I can do this, I can do that. It's all injury related.
Right.
But nobody is ever on TV talking about the most important issue, how to maintain, how to obtain, or how to secure financing for a home.
Well, there's many lending institutions out there, mortgage companies and banks that are actually advertising. I would agree with you, though, with regards to attorneys providing information on how to purchase a home or how to deal with a contract related to buying or selling a home. I would agree with you there. I don't know if it's because most of the public just relies on what they think is a real estate agent who's going to be representing their best interest, or they rely on a mortgage loan officer who is working for the bank or mortgage company. But what people don't understand, and which pretty much is my whole business for almost 28 years as an attorney, a real estate attorney, that is all these transactions are regulated by contracts and by federal and state law. And you don't hear about it on TV until there's a problem.
That's my point. They end up in front of Judge Judy, and they're talking about getting evicted. They end up in one of these Judge Mathis. They're talking about a mortgage problem, and I think that they perform very important services, but they're not talking to people at Proven Resources to avoid problems. You see, the problem in the law is that people do not go to lawyers or do not go to services such as yours for preventative, to avoid problems. And this would make a whole world of difference because basically we're all, and I'm including me, very, very lazy individuals when it comes to reading the fine print and agreements. Isn't that true?
Well, 100%. In fact, most contracts, I like to say, the first 20% of a contract is pretty much people excited about entering into a transaction to buy the home. Everybody's excited to buy the property, which is, it could be commercial, industrial, residential. Everybody's excited about that. It's the other 80% of a contract that regulates these transactions. Those provisions in the other 80% of the contract is what the other party is going to do to you if you fail to meet your obligations, and that's when you have all the issues and problems.
Or even if you get a lease. I tell people on the show that if you're going to lease a house, you have to make sure the person you're leasing the house from actually owns the house.
It's a big issue. Especially in the past, let's say 5 years, both in metropolitan Detroit and Detroit proper, you have a lot of real estate investors coming in from all over the world, throughout the country, and they're buying properties that may or may not, have proper title to the property. And so what happens is the prospective tenant or the prospective home buyer, they're not doing what we just talked about, the prophylactic or the protective work that needs to be done prior to completing a transaction. So people will hand over large deposits to investors, real estate investors, who may or may not own the home. And so those could be charlatans. They're bad actors. There's a whole host of predators out there, especially in real estate. And when real estate is good, people get taken advantage of. Seniors, people who are, with all due respect, desperate for a piece of property to lease, et cetera. I mean, there's so many different variables and so many different scenarios that people get themselves involved with. The first thing that they should do is to go and have a contract or an agreement reviewed by an attorney, a real estate attorney. That's the number one thing that they should do.
So your company, Proven Resources, has a number of lawyers that work with you that assist you in resolving these issues.
Right. So Proven Resource is basically disseminating all the print and online information that relates to how to buy a home, how to deal with a realtor, how to deal with a mortgage company, how to deal with a lawyer, how to hire a lawyer. All that information is through Proven Resource. I do have a law firm at Sobel PLC, and I work with approximately 9 good colleagues, all real estate and finance attorneys that work with me in helping people sort out their problems. So we're professional problem solvers, so to speak.
Okay, let's take this from the top.
Mhm.
I'm going to buy a house.
Mhm.
I'm a first-time purchaser.
Okay.
I need your assistance to buy that house.
Right.
So
So,
tell me what I'm going to do. Now, I'm going to buy a house,
Mhm.
and I'm not going to complicate it. I'm going to make it a simple transaction.
okay. Simple's good.
Okay.
Right.
Mr. and Mrs.
Mhm.
Wilson,
Mhm.
and if the Wilsons are out there, good morning. But Mr. and Mrs. Wilson are selling a house, and David and Mrs. Sobel want to buy their house on Evergreen
Mhm.
in the city of Detroit.
Okay.
So can the Sobels go up to the Wilsons' door and knock on the door and say, hey, is your house for sale?
Well, they can. Most people in this community use a realtor or real estate agent. So the first thing that people do is, in most instances, is they're looking for a home, they'll hire a real estate agent. So the first contract that comes right up to right away is an agreement between the home buyer or the home seller and a realtor, because they have to hire that realtor. So there's a relationship that's created. It's called a listing agreement or a buyer's agency agreement. And there's a host of provisions in those agreements that regulate the relationship between a realtor and or real estate agent and the home buyer and the home seller.
Okay,
So
but your company has
Yeah.
a service.
Mhm.
Even if I use a realtor,
we review those contracts.
that's my
Yeah,
point.
we review those contracts.
Because I may not understand all the provisions in the agreement.
Right, of course. And if you've ever seen a listing agreement between a real estate agent or a real estate brokerage and a prospective home buyer or home seller, you will find that it's like 3 to 5 pages of small print, usually 10 font, with probably 30 to 50 provisions in those contracts. So right there, before you sign up with an agent, you might want to have an attorney, a real estate attorney, review that agreement. Okay, that's number one. Number two, the next step would be, let's say you want to make an offer on that home. Okay, you need to have a purchase agreement. A purchase offer is another term for it. Those agreements, they can be boilerplate, which means they can be very standard, have the same provisions throughout the agreement, or, depending on what the home buyer, home seller wants to do, they'll be modified and geared specifically towards that transaction.
Okay, I have an important question.
Sure.
Suppose I want to buy a house and you're the realtor,
hmm
and you say to me, Mr. Keller,
Mhm.
give me your check,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm going to hold it in my trust account
Mhm.
as the down payment for the house. Should I give you the check before the transaction is completed or after the transaction's completed?
Well, actually, you bring up a really good point. The first thing is, if you're going to have a real estate agent present an offer, once the offer is accepted, that's when you give the check to the real estate agent, and not before.
Let's repeat this.
Uh-huh.
Once the offer is accepted, that's what you said.
Correct.
That means that I've gone and met with you and the offer's been accepted.
Mhm.
Remember the Sobels and the Wilsons, they have a transaction.
Sure.
and now we're ready to make an offer on the property.
Mhm.
So what do I do next? I give the check after it's signed?
Yeah, after it's signed. And so you give that check to your agent, who then places it. It will probably be in the seller's escrow account, but that check is then deposited into the escrow account. The problem we have, Barry, is a lot of people, especially because real estate's so hot, and you're familiar with that, they're so excited about a transaction, they will give money to a real estate salesperson before they even, number one, before they even find a house that they were interested in making an offer in. That's a big no-no. You shouldn't be doing that. Or they give the money, it's called an earnest money again, to the real estate agent without understanding the terms of how they're going to get that money back if the transaction falls through.
Okay, listen to this, audience.
Mhm.
People do not understand how to get their money back.
they-
Recently, I had a client call me, and she said, Mr. Keller, can you help me? We gave a realtor $1,000 as a deposit on a house, and my son went to get a veteran's loan.
Right.
And it took an extended period of time to get the loan. So I called up the realtor and I said, transaction isn't going to go through. I want my money back. Realtor said, well, you're going to have to wait a couple of weeks to get the money back. That shouldn't happen, should
No,
it?
absolutely not. And so here again is a provision within a purchase offer that regulates how earnest money deposits are handled. Number one, they have to be, by law, they have to be deposited with an escrow company or a title insurance company within, I believe it's 2 days, okay? The real estate agent has to deposit it, maybe 2 or 3 days.
Or can it be a trust account at the realtor's
It
office?
can be in a trust account even with an attorney, okay? And yes, it can be with a real estate brokerage as well.
But it has to be in a separate account.
Yes, it has to be in a separate account. And again, I deal with these issues pretty much every week. We'll have people trying to get, the most recent one was I had a gentleman who put a large earnest money deposit down on a home because he was excited to get the home. He was told by the realtor, you're going to lose the home if you don't, if you don't put up more money. Usually the standard earnest money deposit is around $1,000 to $2,000 on a home, okay? Sometimes $500. If it's an FHA transaction, it can be $500. But the amount that's being set aside for an escrow account has regulations as to how that money is handled and when it needs to be returned. There are contingencies in purchase offers that are usually drafted and agreed upon between the parties that are specific only to that transaction.
Okay, let's talk about contingencies.
Mhm.
There are conditions.
Conditions,
For example, and I break the word down from
Sure.
contingency to
of course.
conditions.
There are conditions.
Okay. So the air conditioning has to be fixed, for example.
Mhm.
We need new paint. The bathroom faucet has to be changed. Those are all conditions.
Well, they would be part of what we call an inspection contingency or
Okay.
condition. So there might be a provision. Most purchase agreements have these in the purchase agreement. It will say that the buyer needs to inspect the property within 7 days from the day that the parties enter into the agreement.
Should I ever in my life waive an inspection?
Oh, it's a great question, and the answer is no. Now,
Tell our audience why you should never waive an inspection on a house. Don't be lazy.
right,
Just,
wait,
and
you're-
I'm telling the audience not to be
Right.
lazy, not David.
you're inviting, first of all, you're inviting nothing but problems. Inspect the property, because if you waive that contingency and you don't have an inspection period, you're buying that home as is. You're saying to the seller, I'm going to take the home in its current condition. They call that where is as is. But even in those contracts, you want to have an inspection period. And it's usually 7 to 10 days from the day that you sign the agreement. You're inviting nothing but problems.
Now I'm going to throw a hook to you. Should I
Sure.
buy a house without a certificate of occupancy?
Well, again, purchase agreements, the answer to that question, you can't even live in a home or move into a home. If you're intending that property to be your primary residence, you cannot even move into the home if there's no certificate of occupancy.
Well, how do you find out if there's one?
Well, you go to the city and you really need to have you have an agent. If you have an agent, your agent should go and inspect it and make sure you have it. But I have to share with you, the best thing to do is verify on your own. You pick up the phone and you call the city and they will tell you, oh, you have a certificate of occupancy or you don't. But here's the thing, Barry. Again, I was telling you about purchase agreements. These are provisions that you can have negotiated between the parties as to who is going to get a certificate of occupancy if perchance there is no certificate of occupancy. So normally it's the seller who has to provide it. But let's say the home's not in great shape. Let's talk about the inspection condition. Let's say the home's in terrible shape. Well, the buyer may say, I'll tell you what, I do want an inspection, but even if there's a whole host of issues related to this property, no worries. I'm going to take care of that certificate of occupancy. I'm going to make sure that somebody can live in it as the buyer, instead of you, seller, going to take care of those issues or conditions. I'm going to go take care of it. So you can negotiate that away.
You can't get a mortgage without a certificate of occupancy, can you?
Well, it depends. You know, most townships, municipalities, cities have a requirement for a certificate of occupancy. It depends on the city. I will tell you, 90% of them in the state will have a certificate of occupancy requirement. The big issue these days, especially let's say in Metro Detroit and Detroit, is making sure that if you're going to lease a property, that property has been registered with the city as a rental property.
Okay, we'll come right back
Sure.
and we'll talk about that
Okay.
in a minute. Okay?
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Call 1-800-529-8721. That's 1-800-LAW-USA1. And watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. That's Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law. Saturdays at 10 a.m. here on WHPR Detroit Live.
We're back with David Sobel. David, we were just talking about making sure when you rent a property that the person that you're renting the property owns the property.
Right,
correct?
that's number one item.
Okay.
And it happens quite a bit that people, that's a big issue that we see, that people are defrauded, for lack of a better word, when it comes to leasing a property.
Because they don't know who they're paying the rent to, do they?
Right. There's quite a few issues. The first one is, making sure that you are dealing with the owner, and you can verify that just by going to the county register of deeds, and you can get that information as to who the owner is. Another issue that comes up quite often is, especially again in this very heated real estate market, is property management companies.
Okay, let's stop for a minute.
Sure.
Not only do you have to know who owns the property, but don't you have to make sure that the people who own the property have a license to rent the property?
Sure, of course, and that's, again, registering the property with the city. What happens very frequently is that we'll have people who are paying rent to, unfortunately, what I see is a lot of out-of-state real estate investors who own property but have not registered the property with the city. People are lured to the property by, let's say, a lower rental payment or promises of repairs to a home that never occur. And at some point in time, let's say just here in the city of Detroit, the city will find that that home was not registered, but they'll see somebody living in the home. They'll basically tell that occupant, that tenant, that they have to move out. And so that happens a lot. And those people now are without their rental, a place to live, of course, number one. And number two, they may have given somebody a deposit.
May have, more likely than not.
Right, and they're gonna lose it. And the city will work with you, but not for very long, because they're concerned about the safety and liability with regards to that property. So that's a big issue that I see quite often, is outside investors who may not have even seen the home that they're renting out.
Well, here's the other problem.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't have a certificate to rent the property, that means that there hasn't been an inspection
That's right.
of the property. And if there's no inspection of the property, there's an issue about habitability.
Right. Well, right, because that property has dangerous living conditions, and like I said, the city will want you out of those properties because they don't want to be responsible for letting you stay there, right? So everybody has to kind of move on until you get that homeowner or that investor to repair the. I call it just a checklist of items that the city wants to be repaired before somebody can move in.
Well, in one home, I recently had a lawsuit against the landlord, and it had, excuse the expression, funky steps.
Okay.
Okay, they didn't meet the BOCA standards.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, they didn't meet the building standards, the building code, and the risers on the steps were too high. And this woman was coming down the steps, and she fell, and she fractured her shoulder.
Right.
And the owner of the property said he had an occupancy permit, and he didn't have one.
Right. Right. I mean, and a lot of people don't even know to ask for an occupancy permit, And so those are the first people that get taken advantage of. The other area I was speaking real briefly is property management companies that the homeowner or the real estate investor will hire. They make promises to the tenant that they're going to take care of certain issues. They take their money, but they don't do any of the work that's supposed to be done.
Well, here's a bigger problem that I see with the property management company, is that the property management company is really divorced from the property. They get a percentage.
Exactly. They make a commission off of the monthly rental.
Right. So if they have 1,000 units and they're getting 6% as a property manager, well, they're making 6% off of every unit per month, and they're not as inclined to maintain and look after the property as somebody who owns the property and who has an interest in the property.
I agree 100%. The other issue, too, is that there are quite a few property management companies out there that hold themselves out to the public. They're not licensed, or they're not owned and operated by a real estate broker. So these are, I don't know who these people think they are, but they just hold themselves out to the public as saying, hey, yeah, we are the property manager. Or they'll even tell the real estate investor, yeah, we do property management, but they're not credentialed properly. So that's a big issue as well.
One of the biggest problems I'm seeing in this rapidly moving real estate market, and I'll say the term rapidly moving real estate market, is as rental properties are going up in value, apartment buildings going up in value, is that they're changing hands, and the tenants are really getting ripped off. And I'll say it, they're getting ripped off because when a new landlord comes in, they're not honoring the leases. If someone's late on their rent, they're really pushing them out the door. I mean, they're evicting people who are a month late. I had a lady call me the other day. She said, I owe late charges now of $300 because they're cumulative.
Right.
Each month that I'm behind, it continues to add on, to add on, to add on. And now I'm $300 behind, and they want to evict me. I received an eviction notice. I just had a call on that the other day.
Right.
What's the best advice you can give someone who's in that position?
Number one, go to an attorney. Call an attorney.
Call your company. Give me the number.
888-789-1715. 1-888-789-1715. But, you do need to call an attorney. And I have to tell you, if it's 30 days behind, it's very unlikely that, if you had to go to court, that you would be evicted. The judge probably would say, you need to work this out. But hear me out for 1 second. When you're talking about new landlords coming in or new investors coming in, like somebody will have a lease and then with one company, and then company B comes in, they take over the property. One of the things that I do is I request an accounting from the new landlord as to how the client had paid their rent. So there are a lot of times that the former landlord doesn't give the information, or the proper information, to the new landlord. You see, so that does happen quite a bit. And 30 days behind, if they're just trying to push somebody out, it's unfortunate, but you can usually rectify that situation with a 30-day late. 60 and 90 days late, it's a whole different issue.
Being mindful of that.
Mhm.
When new landlords come in, they try and either move people out or raise the rent.
If there's a lease, it's very difficult. You can't do that unless there's a provision somewhere in the lease. Again, we get to why you need to have an attorney, a real estate attorney, review your leases.
But residential apartment leases
Mhm.
are generally not long-term leases.
They're usually a year.
Right.
Mhm.
So if a new owner comes in at the end of the year, they can raise the rent and
They
move
can.
people out
They can.
and displace people.
It's, again, unfortunate. Depending, every situation is different. I'll tell you where it gets very problematic, I see, is with senior citizens. They've been let's say they've had a great relationship with a landlord for years. They've stayed at the same property for years, and their lease is up, and somebody else comes in to purchase the property, and they change that lease. What I'll normally do, if there's no violation of the lease, prior to it expiring by the landlord, we try and negotiate a transaction, a better deal for the client, and keep them in the property. If the landlord's insistent on having that person move out, we'll try and get them extra time to move out. But I don't know, with all due respect, Barry, if there's, depending on the provisions of the lease, what legal rights somebody has once their lease expires.
Well, in Midtown and downtown
That's a
Detroit,
problem, right?
it's been a major
Huge
problem because these investors have come in, they've looked at the properties, they've decided to renovate the properties, oftentimes converting them into condominiums,
Mhm.
and displacing people who've lived there for 15 and 20 years who've protected the city.
Mhm.
So what can you do for these people?
Again, it's from a legal perspective, I think it's difficult. I think from a moral obligation perspective, it's a whole different ballgame. If there's a problem with the performance on the lease, then I would probably take it to court, to district court. But if the lease expires, there's not much people can do. It's a moral obligation. It's it's a moral hazard not to try and work with these people and get them new housing. But it's not the same. That's a difficult area. I don't know how to even answer that. It's
Well,
unfortunate.
We both agree it's a moral hazard, but
Right.
we need a better solution for the people, and I'm
Right.
not
I don't know the
forcing
right
you-
answer.
Well, you're
honestly.
honest enough to admit
Yeah.
it. We're going to take a break for a minute. We're going to come back and talk about one of your books, Getting Out of Foreclosure,
Mhm.
because this is a big problem. There are many reasons people end up in foreclosure.
That's correct.
We'll be right back.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Call 1-800-529-8721. That's 1-800-LAW-USA1. And watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. That's Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law. Saturdays at 10 a.m. here on WHPR Detroit Live.
One of the problems that I see developing in the city today, in addition to the rental issue, which I believe there should be a rent ceiling in the city of Detroit Council, Highland Park Council, and all the other communities should put in place some provisions for transition. If a new owner comes in to buy a building, at least people should have an additional year.
And I mean, that sounds fair.
Yeah, so that if they pay an increased rent, it can't be more than 10% of what the existing rent is. And then at the end of that year, they have the option of either staying and renegotiating or moving out and finding another place to live.
A transition period.
Right, because you can't take people who were
Right.
living at the same place for 20 years, putting their head down on the pillow, and have all these community ties and say, I'm going to displace you.
Right.
Here, get out of here, get out of Midtown, get some water wings and move down to Wyandotte and learn how to swim. I mean, it's not going to make
Right.
any sense.
So, you know, that issue, we're talking specifically with the redevelopment of Detroit, but also I see that throughout the region related to senior citizens. I see that a lot. They've been in their home for 80-some, you know, I'll have a lot of octogenarians who are in homes that they've been renting from people, and then somebody comes in and says, you know, you need to be out next week. And that does happen.
Because somebody finds a jewel,
Right.
and they want to buy that jewel,
Right.
and they want to take it over, and they don't consider the needs of the people who've been living there.
Right.
Now, we've got another problem going on that you just mentioned, and it's really a big problem. Years ago, there was a practice called redlining,
Right. Redlining.
and I am totally and unalterably opposed to any form of redlining. I've spoken out about it before. I feel that it applies equally to housing as it does to insurance on cars.
Oh, sure. Right.
And we still haven't solved the insurance issue, except to offer some bifurcated, discounted form of car insurance that gives no one protection. But in redlining and housing, it's illegal.
Oh, yeah, definitely so. Actually, I think under Jimmy Carter, it was the Community Reinvestment Act trying to correct redlining. Redlining, basically, for your viewing audience, is discriminating based on race and color and location by banks and lending institutions when they give out loans, when they make a loan.
Yeah, what they used to do is they used to take a particular neighborhood and they wouldn't list houses. They would call them, excuse the expression, pocket listings. And everyone who wanted to buy a house knew somebody that they could get the house through with a pocket listing.
Right.
So they did not have to show it through the real estate board, and it wasn't advertised like you'd have Zillow and these other
Right.
programs that are out there today. And people would be able to pick up a house through a pocket listing. It was like a secret, and I put my hand up here because it was secret. Nobody knew how to get the houses, but they were available.
Right.
Now, we've got the same situation going on with the regentrification.
Right. With regentrification, what's occurring, and I've been reading quite a bit, there's several studies that have recently been published. Most recently, there was an article in Reveal magazine that I was reading. But the idea is that with the regentrification, they're finding that redlining is more prevalent. You'll have occupants and residents of the city who've been in these properties for years, in their homes for years, and they can't get a loan. Yet they'll have somebody moving into the city who's buying a purchasing property, and they're capable of getting a loan. And they're finding it's based on race.
Well, let me
So-
explain it
and
to you.
location.
Let me explain to you in simple terms. African Americans have been living in
It's
the city,
discrimination.
and African Americans have gone to school and gotten an education, and they want to buy the houses in the neighborhood that they're living in. And I'm saying this honestly because this is what's going on. And then there's Whitey on the move who's coming from the suburbs because mom and dad are giving him money to move into Detroit, and they want to buy the house.
The banks what they're finding is that the banks and lending institutions are making loans to those people who are coming in, and the same people who've been living in the property for decades, they can't refinance their house.
So the same people who moved out of the city after the Detroit riots are coming back to the city now, and they're getting the privilege of buying homes. And the people who have lived here are being denied access to finance and purchase homes.
That's correct.
And what, pray tell, lending institutions are responsible?
I wouldn't, Barry, I wouldn't know, but, the Community Reinvestment Act, which is, every bank has a department and a division and a compliance person to regulate that. And I can't say I'm an expert in this area. All I can say is that it's apparently failed,
Right.
according to these studies.
Or let's go one step further. They've taken these beautiful homes, these architectural beauties, and they've priced them out of the market.
Mm-hmm.
So no one who lived in the neighborhood and protected the neighborhood for 20 or 30 or 40 years
Mm-hmm.
can afford to buy those homes today. You agree with
I
me?
agree.
I mean,
It's a startling, it's a really disappointing revelation. And so these studies have just come out. Like I said, the most recent one I just read was from Reveal magazine. So
you go to all the iconic neighborhoods in Detroit, whether it's Rosedale Park, Palmer Park, University District, Sherwood Forest, all the Tony districts where people want to live today, and they're coming in, or you come downtown and you're in Boston Edison, or you're over in Indian Village. I mean, the sticker shock. Sticker shock for these houses today. I see houses going for $600,000 and $800,000 in Indian Village that 20 years ago you could pick up for $250,000, but they're priced out of the market today. People can't buy them, can they?
not necessarily, no.
No, unless they have these
Right.
jobs that are paying them $150,000 to $200,000 a year.
Mhm.
And the people who protected the neighborhoods, who maintained the neighborhoods, are being displaced.
That's correct.
Now, let's carry it to its next level.
Mhm.
Now, I know that you're not into politics, so we're not going to put you there.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
But there's a lady who comes from Grand Rapids. Her name's DeVos, and she believes in charter schools. So more money is being allocated to charter schools and being allocated to public schools. Did you know that?
I'm aware of it. Right.
Okay. And do you know why it's being done? Because of the regentrification. So now we're going to have these colonies of schools in the city that are exclusively for white kids because they're charter schools and they're getting Betsy DeVos and the President of the United States dollars. Did you know that?
I'm learning it.
No, it's a fact. It's not a myth, and this is what we have to fight against. And who's at fault for that? It's the people who live here who didn't get out and vote. They're the ones who were responsible, and unless they're willing to vote and make change, we're not going to make change. So everything that you do in real estate is tied to politics, isn't
Oh,
it?
sure. Definitely.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you guys?
Oh, I'm a little cranky this morning because we got on a subject that really ruffles my feathers, this redlining and all the consequences of it. How are you doing?
You know, I'm fine. I'm even surprised to hear you talking about that subject. But what a lot of black people, specifically in the city of Detroit, is that Detroit was built up to be the biggest black home ownership in the United States. We've held this city down through our tax dollars, you understand, for them to come in and do what they're doing to us. I'm a homeowner. Now our taxes are steady creeping up. So they're doing it not through just one avenue. They're running black people out of the city through all kind of avenues. I understand they're getting ready to start an inspection program, whereas your electric got to be checked if it's not up to their standards. Their plumbing got to be checked. Their furnace, their water heater. These things don't mean they can shut your house down. And I've heard people on this show talk about how they run them up, and what they're saying is true. But we're the one that's paying the burden. You understand? We stayed here. I've been in this house I'm in now. We moved in my house in 1971. Now we're talking 47 years. How are you going to uproot me now? And I just got a thing in the mail recently where they increased our property tax, our property house value. I have 5 burnt out houses on my block. How you justify raising and increasing the value of my house so that you can raise taxes higher. I don't understand that. But what's going on? You guys know?
We don't have the answer, but I'll tell you the solution is to get different politicians in place there who recognize what you're doing. You're protecting the city, and you should be rewarded for protecting the city instead of punished for it. The same thing is in car insurance. I can't begin to tell you how many clients that come to my office, live in the city of Detroit, and have car insurance through a suburb because they have relatives that live in the suburb, and I always have to ask them the same question. Where do you sleep at night? It's that simple, because that's their domicile. That is the question the insurance company is going to want to know, not what it says on their driver's license, but where do they sleep at night. So everything is being cranked up economically. Taxes, car insurance, the repairs on the home, the inspection, everything at the expense of the people who've protected the city. And nobody realizes and has any respect for the people who've protected the city. It's like when Dr. Holly comes on the air. He talks about the same issue. Now, what's your thought on that? Do you think that people are being protected in the city?
In the city,
Yeah.
I think people require protection throughout the whole state when it comes, but with regards to real estate issues and tax issues. But when it comes to regentrification, I do see a lot of people being disenfranchised. And so people need to be politically active and have their voices heard.
Well, I asked you earlier about getting out of foreclosure,
Right.
because there's a lot of people who get into foreclosure, and this is how they get into foreclosure. The taxes increase on their house,
Right.
they get behind on their water bill,
Mm-hmm.
their car insurance increases, and they have a limited budget.
Right. So, I deal a lot with those issues, and so those are hardships, financial hardships that people encounter. There are programs both available through the government as well as through people's lending institution that are designed and should help. I find that the city, with regards to certain issues, let's say water, which has been a very political issue, and taxes, the city will help you with your tax issues. They will not put you in foreclosure if you reach out to them and work with them on a payment plan. I mean, they will reverse a tax foreclosure if they can show that you're making the attempts, that you're making your payments. I don't represent the city, of course, but I represent clients who've had many issues with the city, and they do everything from my experience that they can to keep people in their home. Okay, I know there's a lot of people out there that don't feel that way, but when it comes to making a payment plan with the city, I encourage clients constantly when they call, if they're behind and they have a tax issue, don't go to the city the last week before the tax sale.
Listen to this, it's
Yeah.
really important.
That happens very frequently, that you need to reach out. If you're not going to reach out to your city officials down on 400 Monroe at the county to see what you can do with regards to your property taxes, then at least pick up the phone and call an attorney who's experienced in this area, and we can pick up the phone and try and work with the city and with the county to keep your home and preserve your property. But you have to have an ability to repay those taxes.
What kind of fees do you charge for helping people keep their homes?
It's usually a flat fee, but 9 times out of 10 when it comes to property tax delinquency, we actually work with some of the legal clinics down in Detroit, Wayne State. We'll refer out to help those individuals with the city. I know people at the county who are always willing to help with the property tax delinquencies, and I put them in touch directly with those people. So I don't really charge anything for that.
Okay, let's talk about the most important bit of advice you give people. Don't wait.
Oh, right. We were talking off the air. I hate to, if it's morning, I understand, but, people come into a lawyer's office, especially mine, when it comes to real estate. They usually come in and they get sick all over my desk. They get sick over my desk and they say, I have this legal problem. I'm very ill. I need you to clean it up. And I'm happy to clean it up. But I'd really prefer that people come to me before the issue. People do not, they call it prophylactic, or, to be, in advance. They don't come in advance to say, I may have this problem, or I'm looking at this issue. What do you think? They usually come to us after there's a problem.
So if you're a year behind in your taxes,
Yeah.
You shouldn't wait until you're
No,
2 years behind.
That's exactly, or 3 years, right?
Okay,
Right.
that's my point.
Right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello. Hello.
Hi, how are you doing?
Oh, good, good. I have a problem for this boy that's on right now. See on TV.
We're on
and I have
TV.
a question for him too, because I finally put in a lawsuit, and they give me a grant.
Okay, what's the problem?
Well, they fixed some teeth for me, and they had one crown, and it broke off, and my teeth is uneven, so I can't chew on one side. So they said they can't fix it.
Okay,
So
I have an answer for you.
Yes.
Call me at 248-335-9266,
Okay,
and
well,
I
thank
will
you.
give you the name of a specialist, an attorney who specializes in suing dentists.
Oh, okay. Now, what is the one number?
248-335-9266.
335
9266.
9266.
And I will give you the name of an attorney who specializes
Uh-huh.
in suing dentists. That's all he does. Okay?
Is he very expensive?
No, he's not very expensive. Okay?
Okay.
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 Have
What's
a.
his name?
I can't give you his name on the air. You just call me and I'll give it to you. Okay?
Okay.
Because that wouldn't be fair to other attorneys.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a blessed day. Good morning.
Good morning. I have a question.
Is it a real estate question?
Well, I'm not sure.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Okay. Don't know if homeowners insurance is involved. I have a person who had a personal car parked in front of the house, and another driver ran through a stop sign, caused an accident. The person I'm talking about, the car was destroyed in front of the house parked. Now, is this a claimable issue through homeowners insurance? Because so far, that individual is unable to determine if the car, the people that caused the accident, if they have full coverage or not.
Well,
So should she be going to through the realtor to find out about homeowners insurance?
First of all, no, it's not a homeowner's situation. It's a car insurance situation. And if you have car insurance on that vehicle that was parked in front of the house, you
No
may,
fault.
if you have coverage on the car, it's called collision coverage. If you have collision coverage on the car, then you report it to your own insurance company, and your insurance company will pay you for the loss.
That's collision, but this person has no fault. No fault doesn't include collision.
It may or may not. If you'll do me a favor, if you'll call me on Monday at 248-335-9266, I will go over the contract with you, okay?
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
All right.
Now, back to the foreclosure.
Sure.
So I got a water bill, and I'm behind in my water bill. Where do I go to get assistance so I don't lose my house?
Well, the first place is the city water department, and they have stated that they will work with you on a payment plan. I don't know how far behind people have gotten, but they will work with reasonable payment plans. They do not want to have you lose your property to both, that would be part of the tax sale that would be on the property. So, again, it gets to just being proactive. If you're behind, if you find that you're having issues, I can tell you that there are government programs, there are people out there ready to help you. And if you want to call my office at 888-789-1715, there are programs out there that will help people get current or get on a payment plan with regards to their water bill or their tax bill, or some places have association issues. There are programs for that. There's Step Forward Michigan that I work quite a bit with, which helps people when they're delinquent with a mortgage payment, okay, with a house payment. So those are all nonprofit programs.
So what we're trying to tell people is, look, we know if you're having a hard time, don't be embarrassed, don't be ashamed. Pick up the phone, call David Sobel. He's going to be there to direct you. He wants you to stay in your house. He wants you to
Right.
get your bills paid. He doesn't want you to lose your house.
Right.
Good morning.
Good morning. Next question. There are too many people who are looking for properties to either rent or purchase that fail to do the background checks to determine liens that are on homes because of delinquent water bills. And I know of at least 50 families, all low income, that are so desperate, then they get into these properties, and then they find out there's a $500 or $2,000 water bill that's attached to the house, and they become responsible for it. What advice can you share? And I'll hang up and listen.
Thank you so much.
That happens to be a great question, and that happens quite often. So the lady is completely correct that goes on constantly. The first thing, again, is before anybody, if you're looking to buy a home or even lease a home, but in this situation it's more purchasing a home, don't sign any paperwork until you get an inspection. It's called a title inspection, where we can verify what is going on with the property related to liens, water bills, assessments, all those items. If you enter into a contract with a seller, I see this quite often, they'll be through a quit claim deed, they call it. That seller usually will be taking money from you, like a deposit, a large deposit for either a seller finance transaction where the seller is just going to take installment payments from you. You need to know what obligations that seller has to the government with regards to federal tax liens, water bills, assessments. And if you take that property and you take title to it and put it in your name through a quit claim deed, you're going to be very disappointed. You should always look at the title work before you enter into a contract and before you buy a house, okay? Regardless of the price of the house. The mechanics are the same. Barry, I can tell you, every time somebody buys a home, the mechanics are the same. We review the title work, we review the purchase agreement. It's our job as attorneys to make sure that that person, when they're buying the home, gets what we call marketable title. So a lot of people are disadvantaged. They take a deed because they're excited to own a home. It's called a quit claim deed. Don't do that until you know what is encumbering or what's affecting the property's title.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
We're well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Yes, I would just to say something. I bought a house in 1990. It was a house. There was a gas bill, electric bill, and a water bill. That's my property. I learned. So this, I would like to say, a lot of times we don't have to have insurance because it's the same. You go down to the county code, you'll find out who owns the property, not the city of Detroit, because sometimes the city will have the old homeowner's name on the property than the county. So I would suggest anyone living in Wayne County go down to 400 Monroe Street. You can talk at the time and find out if there's any like gas bills left on their property and along with the water department. And I just want to share that with you all.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Because that was really good advice.
You're welcome. And I listen to you every week, Mr. Keller.
Well, thank you.
Okay, bye.
Well, we're almost done for the day, but I think the most important lesson we've learned from David Sobel, and I really want you to give everybody your telephone number slowly so they can write it down.
It's a lot of coffee in the morning, sorry. 888, that's 888-789-1715. And you can give us a call. We handle the whole state of Michigan when it comes to real estate issues. But my extension is 1101, and I'm happy to speak with you regarding any concerns that you have.
And the issue is resolved in the following fashion. When you're leasing or purchasing or selling, you must be active. You must be
Correct.
proactive. You must make sure everything's in place. If you're facing foreclosure and you haven't paid your taxes and you're facing foreclosure over a water bill, you must be.
Proactive. That's the most important. You have to be your own advocate.
Don't hide in the closet. Don't sit down on the floor and worry about it. Pick up the phone and call David Sobel's office. They will provide you with assistance. That's what they're there for. David, thank you for
Thank
coming.
you very much, Barry. I appreciate it. It was a
Okay.
pleasure. Thank you.
Everybody have a great day.